Hold up, boys. It is time to update my guide on how to grind with a Succession Ranger in Black Desert Online. I want to do that because I grinded with it since it came out and I still love it. So it is time to update it. I want to make it as fast as possible so you guys don't have to hear me yapping on for 20 minutes. So the add-ons and the crystals is going to be in the description down below, so I don't have to cover those. And you can always ask questions if there's any questions to it. And then I'm going to cover the early game, the mid game, and the late game on how to grind. Alright, which abilities that I use and why I use them. Anyhow, I am in the early game now. I made a little list of abilities that you're going to use and why you're going to use them. Alright, so if you're a new ranger and you want to know which abilities to take first and so on, nowadays you take all prime version of your abilities. If there is a prime version, you take it. That's not how it used to be. This list here, early game, prime charging, this is important for the tier 3 add-ons. Prime Descending Current, this is your bread and butter ability in early game. It is for damage and it is for pulling. It does a shit ton of damage early. Prime Blasting Gust is for moving between your packs when your stamina allows it. Your stamina is going to be low in early game, and there's just no way around it. You just have to manage your stamina. It is possible. Prime Ultimate Blasting Gust is for AoE damage. It's an AoE damage cooldown you use basically whenever it's off cooldown. Squill Shot is the same as your Prime Ultimate Blasting Gust. You use it whenever it is off cooldown and the mobs are close together. It is in the skill enhancement window up here. Prime Razor Wind you're using whenever you want to regen stamina and do damage at the same time, or if you want a frontal guard to tank some damage if you're low in HP, for example. Prime Awakening abilities is the same as the Razor Wind. You're using it whenever you want to do damage and regen stamina at the same time. The Prime Extreme Charging Wind is your shotgun, so that is just raw damage, but it's good. Bypassing the Wind is your bread and butter to make a more floaty playstyle, because it allows you to instant cast Tearing Arrow, which is down here, which is raw damage. Tearing Arrow, especially mid and late game, is your main damage ability. Desert is where you're gonna make the most money in the early game. There's Centaurs, that is probably the best, and there's Sulfur Mines, that is also very good money. And then I heard this place down here should be pretty good money as well, in the Crescent Shrine. Another place where you can grind if you don't have the Infinity Potions is the Infinity Potion places. I think you should look up a guide for that if you don't have it. And then there is the Polyforest as well in the early game if you want to make a bit of money. Basically, you're rotating between 3 abilities, and that is the Prime Descending Current. It is the Prime Ultimate Blasting Gust, and if the mobs are close together, it's the Squill Shot. And aside from that, you can use a Razor Wind or a Tearing Arrow to finish off low enemies. But what you do is that you go to one pack, you use a Descending Current. If it kills them, you move on to the next one, and then you use the Prime Ultimate Blasting Gust, because that is the bigger AoE. And then you go on to the next pack and basically rinse repeat. Whatever ability is not on cooldown is the one that you use. And if everything is on cooldown, Tearing Arrow doesn't do less damage when it is on cooldown. So mid-game to late-game grinding as a Sock Ranger is quite a different beast. We have to think a little bit differently. I want to try and go over it as fast as I can, but still make it somewhat simplified. I will try. It is not that easy, but it is not hard either. It's a question about getting into that mindset of being ranged in a grind spot. But in reality, whenever you are looking up a new guide on a new class, you are thinking, what is the combo? What abilities do I have to use in order to make a combo that does a lot of damage so I can grind fast? It is not that simple. Because with a Succession Ranger, I still don't think there is a combo. There is a set of abilities that you use after each other, but there is no combo, if that makes any sense. But I updated this a little bit here. Combos down here, mid-game down here, which is also late game, by the way. But big damage combo is Tearing Arrow, Penetrating Wind, Shotgun. That is probably one of the higher damage combos we can come out with. Sometimes when you're grinding, you don't have to use a shotgun every time. You don't have to use a Penetrating Wind every time. You can, in theory, use a Tearing Arrow and then you use Bypassing the Wind and then use another Tearing Arrow. But that's not really used in PvE, but you can. Basically, Tearing Arrow, Penetrating Wind, Shotgun is what you would have to learn if you want to learn a combo as a Succession Ranger. It looks like this. It is SE on your keyboard for the Tearing Arrow, and then you press Shift right click in order to use the Penetrating Wind near the end of the cast of your Tearing Arrow, and then you're pressing spacebar by the end of it. So basically SE, and then you cast it, and then you Shift right click and then spacebar. That is the combo. Learn that, master that, so you can do it in your sleep, because that is one of the combos that you're going to do a shit ton of times. Sometimes you want to adapt, and then you want to use another one, so you right click to it, and then you can basically use another tearing arrow. It looks like this, a lot used in PvP, but not very much used in PvE, because that means no back attacks. But that is basically it. This is the combo, and then the pre-buffs and debuffs up here is Blasting Gust, the 2 Awakening abilities, and Will of the Wind. That is the 3 abilities you're going to use before you engage for the damage. Blasting Gust you use to go to the pack. The 2 Awakening you use to buff yourself and debuff the enemy, and Will of the Wind you use to debuff the enemy. The more late game you get, the more Will of the Wind damage you're gonna use, because Will of the Wind in late game is a damage ability that is not prime version, but it still does a lot of damage. I have another guide how to grind with Will of the Wind as your main source of damage. Not gonna touch that too much today, but these 3 abilities here is what you're gonna use. So basically use the Blasting Gust to go in close to the target, it debuffs them, and then you're gonna use your 2 Awakening abilities. Which one doesn't really matter too much. Regeneration you can instant cast Tearing Arrow from with bypassing the wind, like I did right there. But aside from that, it really doesn't matter which one you use first, and then use your Will of the Wind, this ability right here, in order to debuff them as well. Now, there is a few more abilities that I didn't mention, obviously, like the Prime Ultimate Blasting Gust, the Squall Shot, and the Descending Current. The reason why Descending Current in mid to late game, the more late game you get, the more Descending Current is becoming a pull mechanic. You're using it to pull monsters around you, basically shoot it around like this, pull in all the mobs, wait for them to come close, and then combo them. And the Prime Ultimate Blasting Gust is a damage cooldown you still use a lot. Like, it's one of the most used abilities, so use it whenever it's off cooldown. Same goes with Squall Shot. The difference on which one to use at the right time is what makes a good ranger. Because Blasting Gust is a huge AoE like this. Squall Shot is a tiny AoE like this. So basically that means if you are grinding, and this is you over here, this is the ranger, and then there's mobs up here, down here, up here, up here, up here, up here, and down here. Bam. A Prime Ultimate Blasting Gust here is going to hit them all. All of them, right? But if you're using a Squall Shot, it's only going to hit this little tiny hitbox here. So you have to gather them before you hit a Squall Shot. But if you're using the Prime Ultimate Blasting Gust, you can hit them all. So which one of your abilities you want to use in the right time is what defines a good ranger. Depends all the time how many monsters there is, how grouped up they are, when to use which ability. That is completely up to you to learn. But in a general thought, you're going to use the Squall Shot whenever it's off cooldown and the mobs are close together, and you're going to use the Prime Ultimate Blasting Gust whenever the mobs are very spread. And then the Descending Current is your pull mechanic. Aside from that, there's not too much extra to it. The only thing is, the more late game you get, the more Will of the Wind you're going to be using. But basically, if this was a pack of mobs, right, I would be going into them. I would be doing something like this. And then I would debuff them, both of them, use a Will of the Wind to get around them, and then combo them in the back like this, right? If there's a lot of mobs, I use a Prime Ultimate Blasting Gust. If there's not a lot of mobs, I might just use a Squall Shot. So there is one more combo that I just quickly want to mention. Since we got a new ability down here called Binding Arrow, you can combine this in to use a Squall Shot, Binding Arrow, and then the Penetrating Wind Shotgun. It's a decent combo in PvE to do whenever the mobs are very grouped up, because the Prime Penetrating Wind is also pretty good when it comes to mid game and late game grinding. So you're gonna use a Squall Shot. I use it from my hotbar down here, and then you press F at the end of it, and then you shift right click and then spacebar like this. Then you're going to use all of those combos together, which also, again, it's very tight. It's only damaging it right here. So it's not, so if the mobs are grouped up, it is pretty decent. Basically like that. Aside from that, honestly, I think it's a lot more about learning. Remember the combos that we talked about in here: Tearing Arrow, Penetrating with Shotgun, and then the debuffing abilities up here. You can find my add-ons in the description down below. That's about it, boys. I hope that it made some kind of sense, alright? If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, boys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.